ready? Alrighty.
I hope so.
I'm Kayla Cronin. Today is December 18th, 2003, and today I'm interviewing Mr. Bruce Manell. Okay, where were you on December 7th, 1941?
I was at Tub Mountain working on the railroad at a yard job, switching trains, and the engineer gave me a ride back to the yard office to pick up a new switch list, and the clerk came out of the yard office saying the Japs just bombed Pearl Harbor. I said, so what? He said, well, he says, I think it's ours. I said, no kidding, where is it? He said, it sounds like it might be out in the Pacific somewhere. So I went and finished up the hour that I had left to work and went home and told my father and mother about it, and they turned the radio on, and it was about an hour later that we heard the teletype apparently picked it up before it got released somehow.
Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted. I could have been exempt on account of working on the railroad, but I didn't want it that way. And my father wouldn't sign for me right away either, because I wanted to go in right away, and he wouldn't sign for me right away. And later on that year, he did.
What made you decide to be a combat photographer?
The Marines.
The Marines?
Yeah, I couldn't read the colored spots they had these diagrams, and so they wouldn't accept me. They said I was colorblind, and I said I could pick out the ribbons all you wanted, the colored strings or whatever. And they said, well, this is the test you have to pass. So it so happened that the sergeant in charge of the recruiting office down in Glens Falls was a friend of mine from Whitehall, much older, of course. And he allowed me to go down 2-3 days a week and memorize. He told me what was on each page, and I memorized what was on there, and then went over to Rutland with my father to sign up over in Rutland. And they had an officer, a commissioned officer over there. He says, read the colors in there. So I read them off one after another, and got all through. He said, you did a very fine job. You got all the right numbers, but on the wrong pages. It was a loose leaf book. They didn't have them in the same order. So he says, if you want to get in that bad, he says, I can't give you a straight deal or whatever. So he wanted to know if I had any hobbies. I said, yes, photography. So he called Washington, some place down in Washington, and talked to them for about 15 minutes, and they said, yeah, they take me on. So they swore me in, and I went down a few days later to Paris Island boot camp, and that was quite a place. You learned a whole new language down there. And after my boot camp, I was sent up to Quantico to Marine Corps schools for photography training, and they were just starting the schools at the time. As a matter of fact, we did carpenter work while we were trying to get it together. And I was the only amateur photographer there. All the rest were professionals. There were newspaper photographers, magazine photographers, studio photographers like that. I was the only amateur, and they kind of looked down on me until I pulled a ringer out of the hat on them. The job they were trying to do for several weeks before I got there, and I did it in about 10 minutes. But they're looking at it from a complicated side, and I was looking at it to the basics, and the basics worked out real fine. But the Washington Post wanted a picture of the altar of a church, beautiful with flowers and everything else they had for Christmas, and Easter was just coming on, and they wanted to run it again in black and white. The color picture, they wanted to run it in black and white for Easter. So they were trying to find some way to do it, and they couldn't do it. And as I say, I used the basic method and came out with just what they were looking for. So they kind of respected me after that as one of them.
So where did you go after your photography training?
Well, I had more photography training. 5 of us were sent up to Life magazine for advanced photography training. Boy, what a place that was. Those guys could do miracles with cameras, and in the dark room especially. And I was sent up there for another 8 weeks, and I worked right along with the Life photographers, helping them out and talking with them and living with them. And staying in a hotel at night. That was real nice. But they had a very complete setup. I was very familiar with their whole process before I left there. And I learned an awful lot of good stuff. And then I went back down to Quantico, and they wanted me to be an instructor down there. And I said I didn't join up to be an instructor. There's a war going on. I wanted to be part of the war. I talked to them for a couple of weeks before they finally said, well, we're going to make the assignments tonight. They're having a meeting. Want to know if I still wanted to go overseas? I said, yes, by all means. So he said, well, we'll send you over for 1 year, and 1 year only, and then you come back. And I was out there 2.5 years. I was fighting to come back for 30 days. I wanted to get a little leave because they told us when we were at Guam at the time that our next stop was going to be Tokyo Bay, and there was going to be a lot of bloodshed. So I said I'd like to go home for my 30 days, which I was way overdue to have, and say goodbye to my parents and stuff. So my girlfriend from Hudson Falls.
What experiences from your time in service do you remember the most?
Oh my golly, experiences, there's so many of them.
Well, you can share them all with us.
I don't know where to start. I was very impressed when at Palmyra, the first island I was at. That was a small atoll, and an atoll, I don't even know, it has a bunch of small islands in the form of a necklace. And you could have taken that atoll of Palmyra and put it in Hadlock Pond up there and had room to spare. It was a half mile wide and 3/4 of a mile long, and you could stand on any island and throw a stone into the ocean on the other side of the island, all except for one island. That was Easter Island. But when we pulled up there, the little gasoline tankers full of airplane gasoline going down there, and we had 5 passengers who were crowded on the poop deck. But we got down there and saw this swampy-looking area, and I happened to be talking to one of the sailors. I says, that's going to be your home for the next few months. I said, where's the main island? He said, you're looking at it. I said, no, that's a swamp. I said, where's the main island? He said, you're looking at it. Well, it was, it was the island, and you could walk around it in a half an hour. But I spent about 7 months there, and we were strictly on the defensive then. We didn't even have any fighter planes there. We had dive bombers, and they'd go out and patrol. If they saw any sign of Japanese planes or anything, they wouldn't try to fight them. They'd come back and land and hope our anti-aircraft could take care of them. And it was half of that outfit. That was the 1st Defense Battalion. It was half of that outfit that was in the Battle of Lake Island. Major Devereaux, that was in command at Lake Island, was the executive officer of the 1st Defense Battalion. And I think they did I'm real proud of what they did up there. A great outfit. Want me to carry on?
Yeah.
So after 7 months there, the Army came down to relieve us, and half of our outfit couldn't get us all on the island together. So half of my outfit went aboard ship, and half of the Army came in, and the other half of my outfit went aboard ship, and the rest of the Army came in. And as soon as we took off for sea, we got hit by a tidal wave, and we had rough seas for a whole week until we got to Pearl Harbor. And I got land sick from that. One of the sailors said, stay midships, you won't get seasick. I did that on the starboard side, and I didn't get seasick, but we were on shore for about an hour, and I got sicker than a dog. Oh, I was sick. So a couple of my buddies took me over to sick bay, and they checked me out, and they said, well, you're healthy enough. I said, oh, I feel terrible. They said, well, you don't seem to have anything. They said, have you been to sea? I said, yeah, I just landed an hour or so ago. He said, we're rough seas, yeah. Did you get seasick? No. He said, well, you're land sick now.
Amanda Bromley, please come to the principal's office. Amanda Bromley, please come to the principal's office.
But then a buddy of mine from Whitehall that I played football with in Whitehall at high school was in the reinforcements that came out to join us, and they changed our name from the 1st Defense Battalion to the 1st Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion. We were going to be an offensive outfit, and we went out to for the Marshall invasion, and we were fortunate there. We saw no action. Kwajalein and those places up in the northern part got it. I landed on Majuro, which is about halfway down the chain. There are two chains of islands there. And then from there we went out on reconnaissance to sub-islands of the islands where the Japanese were, see if they had any outposts. We spent a week doing that. And I spent about 6 or 7 months there, 8 months maybe, and came back with on an auxiliary flat top to Pearl Harbor again. And I had 2 years over by that time. And well, I was on a list to come back to the States for my 30 days. I was in a rest camp. And then one afternoon, a runner came over to me. He said, the colonel wants to see you in his office tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So I went over, I got there about 5 minutes to 10. Talked to the first sergeant, and he said, you're here to see the colonel? I said, yeah. So I let him know you're here, and they didn't have full walls over there. They go up to about 2 feet from the ceiling for circulation. It was hot over there all the time. So you could hear everything that went on, and shortly after the first sergeant went in, I heard boo, 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 boo. I said, boy, somebody's catching it. So after a while, the first sergeant came out, and I said, that wasn't for me, was it? And he said, it sure was. You can go in now. I said, oh, my golly. So I went in there, and the colonel jumped all over me for about 15 minutes. Told me when he said 10 o'clock, he meant 10 o'clock, not 1 minute before or 1 minute after, but 10 o'clock. And I'm saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. You get all done with that, he said, well, I have an award here for you. He opened up the top drawer, and he gave me an award. He said, while you're here, he says, I got to tell you that just got orders that nobody's going back to the States until after another operation. Let me stop. Until after another operation. So he says, with what you had out here, he said, I'll give you your choice of wherever you want to go with. I said, I don't know who I want to go with. So he said, well, I might suggest the 6th Marine Division. He says they're forming that down at Guadalcanal, a bunch of salt. They've all seen at least one operation. They've experienced. It sounds like a darn good outfit. I said, okay, I'll go there then. So he made out the orders, and I went down there, and they were a very great outfit. And I had as good a photography setup as you care to see. I had my own darkroom trailer, a monstrous trailer like you see on a tractor trailer, and it was fully equipped. And I had, well, they put me in charge of 5 other trailers for a half-tone process, getting ready for printing on the papers and magazines and like that, and put out a lot of stuff. And they're the ones that designed the shoulder patch for the outfit. But I was only a corporal, and put me in charge of it, and I had tech sergeants and everything else under me. But it was a great outfit, and once we got into action, though, I never saw much of them again. I was pretty much on my own. So after a couple of months on Guadalcanal, we went up to Ulithi, which is a monstrous atoll. It went out of sight over the horizon. And the USS Franklin was there. Just came back from Okinawa, and they were hurting real bad. That was a flat top, and you could see right through their hangar deck, and there were holes all through it. It was a mess. And I found out later that another one of my schoolmates was killed on that during the attack. But we had they brought us over to an island called Magmag. Each one of the individual islands in the atoll had names. They brought us over to the island of Magmag, and all that was a big beer garden. And the Navy gave us all the beer we wanted to drink for all day long, and oh, what a place that was. It was wild. But they gave us a good time before we went up to Okinawa, and we hit the China Sea going into Okinawa. Hit the China Sea, and it's supposed to be one of the roughest seas in the world, and I won't deny that a bit. When you see ships going out of sight down waves and coming up on the top of the waves, and the screws, the propellers come out, the whole ship vibrates like that because there's no water there, and then you get back down it. They say they're pretty rough. And anyway, we pulled up off Okinawa during the night, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, they woke us all up to get ready to go ashore. We were landing the next morning, and I said, I'll go up topside and see what's going on. So I went up topside, and my golly, guns are going off. That Navy, they really knew how to spit out the stuff. But there are times when you can see the shape of a hill with all the explosions going off at once that were hitting a hill. You can see the shape of the hill. And there is a tremendous barrage. And then just about daybreak, they let off on that, and fighter planes and dive bombers and whatnot came in. They did an awful job on the shore. It was a spectacular sight also. And then at 20 after 8, I went ashore with the first wave. And you go to shore in one of these LCMs or LCVPs. I was in an LCM, and you got this big metal door in front of you, and they ram it into the shoreline, and as soon as it stops, the door flops down, and you're wondering what's going to be on the other side, you know. And there was nothing there. We were surprised, so we went ashore and started doing our job like we were supposed to, and where's the Japs? Where's the Japs? Nobody seemed to be able to find the Japs. And then we started getting reports a couple hours later, well, such and such has found some Japs down south of us here a ways. And then they started getting heavier and heavier resistance down there, so we found out where the war was. But our job was to cut the island in two and then proceed north from there, which we did. And we got scattered resistance here and there, except for one night. They had a banzai from all over the island. They just seemed to come out the ground at us around 11 o'clock at night, and it was a horrible night. And I shot my first Jap that morning on Okinawa, and I have the grenade he was trying to throw at me. I have that home for a souvenir. But then after that, why, I won't mention any names. There was one of the divisions that was on the line where all the combat was. I was told there was friction between the officers and the enlisted men, and they weren't getting along too well on the lines. They were getting shoved back. So they wanted my division to go on the line and replace them. And we went up there and with 2 regiments right away, and the rest of the division was packing up to move down there. And the outfit that we're relieving, we're supposed to fall back just back of us and give us support until our rest of our outfit got down there to work with us, except for their artillery. Their artillery stayed there and continued to function with us, and they did a great job. So the 2 regiments of my division around the line, they were told to hold. We held, and the next day they said to go up to a certain area, which we did. And this outfit that got replaced was supposed to come in behind us and still give us a backing until our rest of our outfit got down there. They didn't. They stayed where they were, and the Japanese noted that. And at dusk that night, they made a counter landing in between us and the outfit that we relieved. And we were getting shot at from both sides. And that was another rough night. And we caught the line up though. There was another Marine Division. The 1st Marine Division was to our left as we were heading south. We were going down the west coast. And to the left of the 1st Marine Division, there were 3 Army divisions. And they all got held up by cliffs that were about 800 feet tall. And they couldn't do much of anything. And the 1st Marine Division is where the terrain started tapering off a bit, and they had a location up there called Shuri Castle, and they had a terrible time there. And the Japanese had one of the most perfect natural defenses set up between 3 hills, all about the same size. They're in the shape of a triangle, of course. And if you try to attack any one of those hills, the other two hills would cover you with all kinds of heavy fire. And we had Sugarloaf Mountain there. We took that something like 14 times, and it got driven back. And about 7 of those times we had to go up and retake the hill because the Navy corpsmen were up there tending to our wounded, and they wouldn't leave them. So we had to go up and retake the hill and bring the corpsmen and the wounded back with us. That wasn't a very good fun affair either. And they had the Naha, Shuri, Yanabaru line. It cut across the island. That's where the Japanese set up their big defense. And my outfit was heading towards Naha, and we were the ones that were able to break through and to start pushing down there. And then we came around to the southern tip of the island, came back up to the top of the 800-foot cliffs, and settled it down. And when we were trying to go down through Naha, Naha was in a sort of a U-shape.
Mr. Williams, please call the main office. Mr. Williams, please call the main office.
Naha was the capital city, and there were hills around 3 sides of it in a U-shape, and to the west was the coastline of the China Sea. And we were coming down, we got to the top of this hill, probably a quarter of a mile down with a gradual slope, and right down into the city of Naha. And they were hitting us with artillery from the other side of the city. And we tried getting down there several times and didn't have much luck at it. So we did manage to get a cadre down there at the bottom of the hill. They set up a short line. The Japs were all over there. I dropped something. But as soon as we break over the top of that hill, they'd start shelling us day or night. They had good observation, I guess, somewhere. So they decided to try to do something at night. And the dirt road going down into the city. One of the generals said that Okinawa had the most efficient setup of inefficient roads that he ever saw. There's a dirt road going between every farmhouse to every other farmhouse, you know. But this is a dirt road going down into the capital city, and they had that heavily mined. Every time we started down there, our vehicles would blow up and stuff. So this one night at midnight, they decided they're sending out the demolition crews to go down and take the mines out of the roadways so we could get down there. And they spent most of the remainder of the night getting them out, and they came back up, and they said, well, it's all cleared now down into the city. So it started out with trucks and whatnot, and they didn't go 200 feet, and the first one got blown up. They remined it in the meantime. So then they decided, well, we'll try to put a Bailey Bridge or 2 rivers going through Naha, ran out to the ocean from the hills, and one on each end of the city. And the near one, they figured they'd try to put a Bailey Bridge across that during the night, during the darkness, and then have the troops go down at night and be across that river and towards the southern end of the city before daybreak. And they're always sending me out on reconnaissance to get pictures, but they wanted me to go down and get pictures of the river banks and whatnot, and they sent 3 combat engineers out with me because they knew more about the mechanics of the thing than I did. And so we're starting out, we let the guys know on the lines, on the front lines, let them know we're going to be out ahead of them, and okay, fine, we'll keep an eye on you. And shortly after we left them, there was the remains of a thatched hut over on our left, and there was a Jap there that started shooting at us, and I just happened to notice he hit about 14, 15 feet over our head, the side of a hill there. I happened to see the bullet hit. So the engineers hit the ground. I said, get back on your feet quick. He said, what are you, crazy? No, get on your feet quick. So they got up. So I said, as long as he's shooting high, don't worry about him. So we kept on walking. We got out of his range. In the meantime, the guys on the lines had him spotted because they couldn't very well miss him. And then they started shooting at us with mortars, but the mortars were falling short, and we didn't pay any attention to them. Then they started in with a 150. That's a pretty big field piece, a cannon. And they dropped one short, dropped another one that's closer but still short, and then dropped one beyond us. I said, now we take cover. So they got behind a hill over there. There's a shell hole there. There's a big tree on top of the knoll. And I got behind the tree so I could watch in case anybody started coming towards us. And the next one landed right alongside of me, about from here, that television set there. And I was bleeding instantly all over. And my helmet was blowing off. And after I got out of the hospital, it was given to me by the quartermaster. He said the guys on the lines were quite impressed with what we did out there. And they saw my helmet go through the air and they wanted to give it to me for a souvenir, so they brought it back. He said, you can't shave in it anymore, so I'll give it to you for a souvenir. Here's a new one to wear the rest of while you're here. So anyway, after I was hit, it was all blood. I couldn't see a thing. I still had my camera, ran back towards the lines, and I was trying to wipe the blood out of my eyes so I could see where I was going. It's just like honey. It's all sticky and gooey and stuff. And couldn't see. When I got back to the lines, a couple of the guys around the line stood up and let me run right into them. And they were hollering, Corpsman, Corpsman, Corpsman when I got back there. And I don't know, 2 or 3 corpsmen came over. They said, where are you hit? And I said, I don't know, I can't see a thing. I said, I'm numb. So they said, you hit in the face? I said, I don't know. So they wiped my eyes out, and I could see why they were asking me. I was complete red from top to bottom. So he took all my clothes right off. He stripped me right down, cleaned me off, and covered up the holes in my head. I had 2 holes in my head. They covered them up and brought me back and put me in a gathering area. They had other wounded guys there. Then an Amtrak came down, and they could carry 6 in the bottom of that. So I was one of the first ones they put in there, and they put 5 other guys in with me. And they took us back up out of the city, redid the bandages, and first time I was ever drunk. They wanted to give me plasma. I said, no, save it for the guys that need it. I don't feel weak. I don't feel dizzy. I feel all right. So they gave me a little 2-ounce bottle of whiskey, and of course I drank it and got back out of the city. They redid my bandages. They wanted to give me plasma, no, so they gave me another 2 ounces of whiskey. And by the time I got back to the hospital, I was drinking a hoorah. And it came in handy because the surgeon that operated to take the shrapnel out of me and put me back together again, he had a nurse from Kansas City that was assisting him. I can't remember her name, but I'll never forget. She was an awful nice gal from Kansas City. And she said, grab my wrist and squeeze all you want. And I said, what for? She said, you'll find out. We don't have any anesthesia except for the extreme bad cases. So I held onto her wrist, and she was black and blue from my squeezing. I must have done an awful job there, but he took the shrapnel out, about the size of a dime, and my ear was split open, and he took 4 stitches in that, closed it back up, and I looked like a Turk with a turban on. But there was a rainy spell along about then, and a lot of the guys were coming in with trench feet. The skin was rotting off their feet. As a matter of fact, they had to cut the shoes off their feet, and when they did, skin and flesh came right along with it. And oh, how they stunk. Whew. But oh, and there was a Red Cross guy there in the cot next to mine after the operation, and he was a real nice guy. He was in World War I. He was in the Marines. Never got a scratch when he was in the Marines over in France over there during the war. And he's too old to sign up for World War II. So he said, well, try to get in the Red Cross. So the Red Cross said, yeah, we'll take you on. They gave him the training and everything else, and this was his first stop representing the Red Cross on Okinawa. And the first night he was there, he got shot through the big toe by a kamikaze who was strafing in the area there. And he thought that was quite funny. He said, I went through World War I right in the middle of it all, never got a scratch, and I joined the Red Cross the first day I'm wounded. But he is quite a guy. And well, and before we got down to Naha, I watched an Army outfit. I think it was the 77th, I'm not sure. Either the 7th or the 77th. They made a landing on the island of EA. It's spelled I-E and pronounced E-A, which is just off the end of Matobu Peninsula. And I was on the hills in Matobu watching them make the landing. And after about 20 minutes or so, word came back that Ernie Pyle was with him and he just got killed. So that was quite a shock. I never met Ernie, but I did happen to be watching these troops when he got killed. So anyway, I was back in the hospital about a week with all the trench feet and everything else. There was another outfit there, the first Black Marines, and they were down unloading ships somewhere, and they came across some alcohol, so they had themselves a big bash drinking up the alcohol, but it turned out it was denatured alcohol, and they were all agonizing screams and hollers, well, and before they die, you know, it did an awful job on them. So the hospital wasn't even too pleasant a place. And after about a week, I said, I got to get back up there and help my outfit out, because I saw a lot of my buddies coming in the hospital. So they said, you're not ready? I said, I'm ready. I want to go up. So with this turban and everything on, I went back up on the lines, and I was a little gun shy when I got up there. And doctor let me notice that right up there. The doctor watched me. He noticed right off the bat, so he said, you might better go back and take another rest. So he gave me a whole bunch of, he says, yeah, when you get back there, they'll ask you these questions, and he says, I want you to give these answers. And he went through a performance with me. And so he sent me back. He said, I'll get you back to the States. I got back there, and sure enough, this doctor starts asking me the same questions he told me. And I started answering, and after a couple of three, I said, Doc, I said, I'm lying to you. I can't lie to you. That's not the actual case. I told him exactly what happened. He said, well, he went back up too quick, so nothing wrong with that. He says, hang around here as long as you want to, and when you feel you're ready to go back up, go. So I stayed there another week, and I got to get back up there. So I went back up and to finish the operation. And I remember on the south slopes I was telling you about where the Japs were, actually got it pretty well settled down, or quieted down, I should say. It wasn't settled down. I was sitting on the slope with several buddies eating K rations for noontime. And all of a sudden this R4D, C-47, whatever, it's a two-motored commercial plane we used to have around here all the while. But one of them came up out of this valley right over the hill where we were, and he was spraying. That was the first thing the government did every time we took an island of any kind. They'd spray it to get rid of all the insects and bugs as much as possible. And they came up, and all we did was cover up our K rations until such time as all the stuff came down. We wiped off our faces and our hands, went back to eating our K rations. And from then on, wasn't bad at all. I say there was scattered resistance here and there, but most of the Japanese warriors that were left were committing suicide. A lot of the natives, the natives are nice people, but the thing is, the Japanese were native to them, and they were siding with them pretty much. We walked by them going from one place to another, and they'd be out in the field digging up some vegetables or something to eat. Men and women and kids. Men and women and kids. And after we got past them, so they were looking at our backs, they'd pick up guns out of the furrows and start shooting at us with them. So we weren't too secure at any time. But it's quite an experience. I've been told and I've read that there are more ships and more personnel for the Okinawa invasion than there were for Normandy the year before, or months before, whatever it was. And our losses were quite high. Some of them I hate to even talk about. But some of the unpleasant things, you mind if I talk about unpleasant things? I think you should know about. Everybody says, oh, I know what war is, I've been through it, I meat rationing and all this stuff. Well, in combat, it's not like that. You're not secure at any moment, day or night. They used to shell us anywhere we were at twilight, day, morning and evening. We'd go out, and as we advanced, there were bodies there that had been laying there for a week or two out in the sunshine and whatnot. They didn't smell pleasant at all, a very ugly smell, especially the ones that had been hit by a flamethrower. They smelled like burnt hair. The whole body smelled like burnt hair for some reason. And these other bodies that are laying around, as I said, they've been out there for a week or two in the sunshine. They had maggots crawling in and out of their eyes, nose, mouth, ears, any opening at all. And oh, they're ugly looking things. It's a sorry sight to look at a person that way. And of course, they had their own kind of a stink. That was sort of a Swedish smell. But I felt so sorry for those people. Even the Japs, they pulled some awful stuff on us, and we hated them, but seeing their bodies there, I felt sorry for them. Then after that, why, I'm back to Guam. Help me keep going. Then we're back to Guam, and right off the bat, they told us that our next stop was going to be Tokyo Bay, and the losses were going to be very heavy. It was going to be a bloodbath, and we were supposed to be spearheading it in there. So I had 2 years. Yeah, I had over 2 years, 2.5 years. I don't know, I had about 2.5 years over by then. So anyway, I said, well, I'd like to have my 30 days. I rated that after 1 year. I said, I've been out here 2.5 years. So they said, well, we'd like to have you here. You're a key man, because I did other things besides photography for them. And so they offered me a field commission to stay there, and I turned that down. I said, no, I want to go home and say goodbye. So after 3 or 4 days, they said, okay, first available transportation, and I had a detail of 5 that I took with me, and went down to the airstrip, and we got booted out of there by some senior officers that wanted to get back to the States quicker than we did, I guess. So they sent me down to the port director. I was on the port, and there was a ship unloading out in the harbor of Agana. And they were supposed to be unloaded about 5 o'clock that afternoon. They said, go out and you can go back on that ship. The first stop is going to be San Francisco. So I took the detail down there, and they put us aboard this ship. It's a merchant marine ship. And they're unloading beer. They had tons of beer. So they, the bosun said, you guys can stay here if you want. Just showed us places where we could stay. And we put our sea bags in there. And he came over and started talking to me. He says, you know, we're unloading beer. I said, yeah, good. The guys will appreciate it. So he says, I like beer. I said, you trying to give me a hint? He said, yes, I am. I said, okay, where do you sleep? So he brought me over and showed me the place. So I took my 5 guys with me, went down in the hole, and gee, all buddies of mine down there. I said, you guys look over there for a while. What do you, we've got some work to do. So we brought, I don't know how many cases up to this bosun's room. We filled it right up for him. And but he appreciated that. So after about a half, 3/4 of an hour, why, we're all settled down and watching the activities over the rail. 22 sailors with a chief came aboard, and the skipper of the merchant marine was up in the crow's nest somewhere, and he let it be known in very few English words, lent a lot of other words that he wanted nothing to do with the Navy. All Navy personnel would leave the ship immediately. And the chief said, well, I was sent up here to board the ship. Captain says, no Navy aboard this ship, no Navy personnel. So it was quite a discussion. So then the captain of the ship got in his gig and he went ashore and raised a lot of fuss with the port director and wanted outrageous amounts of extra food and water to get back to the States with those 22 sailors. And so the port director said, well, it's not worth it. So he told the chief to get his men off the, back ashore. So my detail says, what about us? I said, get out of sight. This is one time we're not part of the Navy. So we got out of sight, and the boat was all forward, of course. And we were about 3 or 4 days out at sea and in eating at the time when the captain happened to come in the galley. And what are you guys doing here? I said, well, we're going back to the States, we hope. He said, I don't want any Navy personnel aboard. I said, we're not Navy personnel, those sons of guns and all this. And then the boatswain said, hey, they've been working right along with us, chipping paint and whatnot. So, well, he says, I'll keep an eye on you, but you better behave. So he shook every one of our hands when we got back to San Francisco. We were 22 days at sea, and after we were out about a week, I heard about the atom bomb going off, Hiroshima, and talking it over, I said there couldn't be any one bomb to do that. It had to be some sort of a trick or a bunch of planes dropping a bunch of bombs all at once. And a couple of days later, I dropped another atom bomb. I said, it can't be, can't be. And a few days after that, he signed the peace treaty. So I said, well, it must have been. But we didn't see land for 22 days. I had a touch of appendicitis on the way back, and they had a float plane ready to fly out from different locations in case I needed it. We had no medical personnel on board at all. Got back to the States and went over to Treasure Island for the first night, and the next day I went down to San Diego and spent 30 days quarantined down there. And I wasn't quarantined one day because one of the guys in my detail had to see a female Marine. I had to think of her name to call her. A female Marine up at El Toro Marine Air Base, which is just a few miles away. Because a guy in his outfit had his problems and he couldn't put it through the censored mail, so he wanted the guy in my detail to tell his sister what was going on. So anyway, he said, you got to get us out of here. I said, I can't get us out of here. We're confined. You got to get us out. It's very important. I said, call her on the phone. He said, I got too much to tell her. So anyway, I said, I'll see what I can do. So at noontime, I walked over to the main office, and everybody was out to lunch except one guy, Peanuts Edwards from Granville. I knew him before I went in. So yeah, we were all alone, so I told him what the problem was. He said, there's no way I can get you passes to get out. So I said, well, you have any blank forms? He said, yeah, right here in the drawer. He says, the old man will never sign them. No, he said, give me a couple. So he made out a couple there, showed me his card, and I copied down the signature as best I could, and we got out every night that week. These 2 female Marines came down. They were a nice girl. We had a good time there, and usually all we did was eat and talk, that was all. But it was an interesting deal. And then, well, that was when I heard my first jet. Walking across the big parade ground there in San Diego, and I could hear this wind going all the while. And I asked one of the guys on the base, what's this wind I hear all the time? He said, that's a jet what? A jet airplane. I said, I've heard about it, but where is it? He said, well, when you look up in the sky, he says, don't look towards the sound. He said, look ahead of the sound. He said, that's where the plane is. So they're going that fast and they're that high. And I started seeing them when they went by. There's only 1 or 2 of them. So after my 30 days of quarantine, I managed to get back home, and I got married a week after I got home. And after my 30 days, I had to report to Iona Island down here in the Hudson. It's about 24 miles north of Times Square. It's an ammunition depot. I was down there. I got there on a Tuesday for my 30 days. Wednesday my records arrived there, and I had a point system for discharge, and I had so many points. You got double points for being overseas. And Thursday they sent me down to Brooklyn Navy Yard to get discharged. I had an interesting thing there. On Palmyra, the first island I was on out there, radar was brand new at the time, and wasn't everybody was familiar with it, but we had a major in our outfit. He was a vice president with NBC, and he went in as a major. And he knew his electronics, so he dug right into the radars that we had there. We had the 268 and 272s and whatnot. He studied them, and then he started making up amplifier circuits and different things. And he was the first person to track a submerged submarine with just a periscope up. And but he designed his amplifiers and stuff, did a real good job. And so he had me taking pictures of them, and he was making written reports and sending them back to Washington. And after 2 or 3 months of that, why, he got recalled to Washington. Back there, it had something to do with radar, he told me. So that was the last I saw or heard of him until I'm down to Brooklyn Navy Yard to get discharged. And they didn't have any room for us, so we had to get our own rooms in a hotel over in the city. We come out to Brooklyn Navy Yard every morning for 7 o'clock for roll calls, and they say, well, we got these details today, you and you and you do the details, the rest of you go on back and come back tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. So, by the way, one of the details I had there was a guard for Harry Truman when he talked in City Hall up there. That was the one detail I had while I was there. Pardon me. But anyway, this major, when I was walking down the street one morning, this major from back in Palmyra was coming down the street, and I got along good with the officers. So I recognized him, and he recognized me about the same time. I said, Major, you old son of a gun. And sir, he didn't have the maple leaf on anymore. He had a star there. He's a general now. They took him back from Palmyra and brought him back and put him in charge of all Marine Corps radar. But he said, no, he said, we're still Bruce and Major, so that's the way it was. But he was quite a nice guy. They were getting a lot of medical discharges from the hospitals in New York City, and they got priority over the point system. So after about 3 weeks down there, they said, well, we'll send you to someplace close to your home where you can get discharged quicker. So they sent me up to Portsmouth Navy prison instead of the Portsmouth Navy Yard. The prison was inside the Navy Yard. In the Portsmouth Navy Yard, they discharged you on account of the points you had, and I had all kinds of points I'd have gotten out right away, but they sent me to the Portsmouth Navy prison, and they didn't care how many points you had, you got on the bottom of the list. So I did guard duty there for about 3 weeks until I'm out near the top, and again they come out with one of those orders. Nobody gets discharged outside of Bainbridge, Maryland, Great Lakes Naval Training Station in San Diego, so I had to go way down to Bainbridge, Maryland to get discharged. And I was only down there about 3 or 4 days, and I got out. Amen.
Have you ever gone back to the Marshall Islands or Okinawa?
I've always wanted to, but I've never made it. Probably never will. And especially Okinawa, because I left a lot of blood on Okinawa, and a lot of my good buddies did, and it was an ungodly thing. Ungodly. It's a terrible thing.
How do you feel about the Japanese today?
I still don't care to buy Japanese products, but I'm a little leery of them. Although I've met some nice ones. I'm also a ham radio operator. I got to tell you this one. I'm also a ham radio operator. I've talked all over the world, 92 foreign countries I think it is I've talked to. I was talking to this old codger out in Honolulu one day, and we were having a nice talk. He had sort of a heavy accent like. So after we talked for a while, he says, did you happen to be there when the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor? He was back, he said, ha, I'm Japanese. And he let it go. He said, well, ha, I'm United States Marines, and he didn't come back to me. But then a few weeks after that, I saw his a picture on the cover of our ham radio magazine that we get. And he was world famous for how many foreign countries he talked to. He talked to hundreds of them. So I thought it was funny that We were there for Pearl Harbor. I'm Japanese. Well, I'm a United States Marine.
If you could go back and change anything about your time in service, what would you change?
Change anything about my time in the service?
There was one specific incident, something that you.
I think it would probably be to take the field commission and stay with them, because they went to China from there. After they went into Tokyo, they went to China for a few months. I would have liked that experience. And but as I say, all I saw was a bloody mess ahead of me, and I wanted to come home and say goodbye to my parents and my girlfriend. That made the difference. That's the only thing I'm sorry I did for her. Everything else, I'm real proud of what I did, real proud of everybody I was with, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do what I did. I've often said I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm glad I went through it the first time. And I wouldn't want to go through it again unless they asked me to. I'd probably go through it again.
Well, I don't have any more questions. If there's anything that you wanted to say, just if you have anything.
What advice do you have for people like Caleb your age?
Say again?
What advice do you have for kids my age today?
Well, I'm glad you're getting your schooling, because schooling is very important, and I didn't realize how important it really was, although I managed to make my way pretty good. But get your schooling and do a good job, or the best job you possibly can, and keep on learning once you're out of school. When I was working on the railroad as a kid, I was taking a PG course when I started working on the railroad. And one thing I learned on the railroad, if you don't learn something new every day, you haven't done a complete day's job. So I always thought that they had some good advice. They were very efficient workers. My football coach, Gilly, you might remember hearing about Gilly, probably not, but he taught me an awful lot. He told me when I was playing football, you go out there playing football, and after 15, 20 plays, you start getting kind of tired and banged up a bit. He says you feel like slowing down, but he says, think about the guy on the other team playing across from you. He's going through the same thing. If you go back out there looking fresh all the time, it's going to have an effect on his morale, and he's going to be down more. And I guess, well, he told us all that, I guess. But it must have worked, because in those days when I was playing with them, it was a great outfit I was with, we went 3 years, we were unbeaten. We were untied, we were even unscored upon. That was quite a football team. So, I mean, I learned a lot from him. He always told me, go beyond. Your body can do more than what you think it can. Don't give up easy. And that applied so many times when I was in combat. Couldn't go another step, and you had to go another mile and keep going. And it really helped out. And of course, my father, he was a Marine in World War I, and he's the one that led me by the nose and got me into the whole thing. They can say what they want. I don't think there's anybody any better than the Marines. They may come as good, but they don't come any better. Oh, we are good. Now I can start breathing. Gee.